Hi, I'm Jenkins and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And over the course of lockdown, I've spent quite a lot of time here reading many of these books that you can see behind me. And today I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of them. But first, now is a good time to subscribe if you haven't done that already, and you can just click down below. Right, onto the video then. I found that during lockdown, I've spent quite a lot of time sat here or out in the sunshine, reading a good book, trying to take my mind off of coronavirus, and I've really enjoyed some of the books I've read, and that's why I want to tell you about them today. First up is this one from Kemal Ahmed, The Life and Times of a Very British Man. Now, Kemal works for the BBC, but this really is about his upbringing, some of the experience he's had when he's younger, and also discussions of racism in present day. It's a really fantastic read. At first, it sort of took me a while to get into it, but actually, once I started reading it, it was just so enjoyable. So yes, definitely recommend that. Kemal Ahmed, The Life and Times of a Very British Man. We'll pop that down there, and we're moving now on to this. Now, this book is called How to Fight Anti-Semitism, and the author really talks about some of her own experiences with anti-Semitism, but also talks about it in the context of current day. I heard Barry White being interviewed on the radio, and it was one of those books that I just found the interview so fascinating I had to buy it straight away. It also discusses anti-Semitism in the context of current day and with some sort of political things going on, you know, within the Labour Party and over in the States, and it's definitely an interesting one. And I tell you what, it's one of those books, like many of those that I've read during lockdown, that's really given me quite the education. Moving on to this one next, it's Jeremy Vine, What I Learned. I'm a big fan of Jeremy Vine. He's a presenter on Radio 2, and actually earlier in the year I met him and his team at Radio 2, and there'll be a link to that video at the end of this one, and it is the second of his I've read. I've already read It's All News to Me, and I'll tell you what, this one's really interesting because it talks about the callers that Jeremy Vine's had on his radio show on Radio 2 and some of the experiences that they've taught him about, give you a bit of a behind the scenes look at how things work on the radio. And that's, I think, why it's so interesting. He's had a very interesting career. He still goes on to do many great things, and it's definitely one to read. That's Jeremy Vine, What I Learned. And don't forget at the end of this video to go and watch the one when I went and met him at Radio 2. Now, the next two books sort of go hand in hand, and these are the ones right up here next to me. The first is All Out War, and the second is Fallout. Now, these are written by Tim Shipman, who is the political editor at the Sunday Times, and they're quite hefty books, as you can see there. And what they do is they really take a look at the past few years in politics and give you a real sort of geeky, behind-the-scenes look at how things have unfolded in politics over the past few years. And All Out War looks at the Brexit campaign and David Cameron as Prime Minister, and Jeremy Corbyn as leader of the Labour Party, and how all that unfolded, and also just how the referendum campaign worked from both sides, of course. And the second, Fallout, more looks at Theresa May as Prime Minister in the UK, still against Jeremy Corbyn of the Labour Party, and discusses the 2017 election, which is definitely one to go down in the history books. Now, comparing both of these, I think I preferred All Out War because for me it was just a bit more of an interesting time with David Cameron, although Fallout was definitely a good read, and they're like 600-700 pages long, but I read them in a matter of days because they were both so enjoyable. And I think there's a third book on the way as well. Moving on now to the next book I read during lockdown, and this one is written by the former Labour MP for Bolsover, Dennis Skinner. It's called Sailing Close to the Wind. Now, Dennis Skinner was known in the House of Commons as the Beast of Bolsover and quite a force to be reckoned with, and he was an MP for many years before he left Parliament in 2019 at that election. And it talks about Dennis's family background in terms of mining and the upbringing he had, but also talks about some of the experiences he had in the House of Commons. And it's one of those books that when you read it, you can really hear his voice coming through, and you feel like he's telling you all his secrets. Time for my next book, and it's another autobiography actually, which I do quite enjoy sometimes, and this one is by Trevor McDonald. It's called An Improbable Life, and you'll recognise him. He used to be an anchor on ITV and ITN News, and now he's very well known for his documentaries where he goes into prisons, meets people on death row and things like that, and really learns about them and their experiences. And I tell you what, this book gave us a really good opportunity to learn more about him and his experiences, because he's had a really interesting career. He also discusses some of the racism he's experienced over the years and some of the special people he's got to interview, like Nelson Mandela there on the back. It's quite new, it was only out earlier this year, and it's definitely one you need to read. Now, you probably know by now that I like interesting accounts of British politics and elections, and this one actually is by far one of the favourites I've read in lockdown. Betting the House by Tim Ross and Tom Teague, and it's about the 2017 election, and again, it's an inside look into how things worked on both sides. Now, don't get me wrong, I loved Fallout and All Out War from Tim Shipman, but this one is just as good, if not better. It's another pretty long book, but one of those you can really get into, especially when it's only a couple of years ago and it's really in your recent memories. So I definitely recommend Betting the House if you want to take a look at the inside scoop, I suppose, of British elections. Time for one more book, got to stretch up for this one. The Gatekeeper by Kate Fall, who worked for David Cameron when he was Prime Minister, and she was the Deputy Chief of Staff, I think, and this gives a very interesting account, not just of 2015 and Brexit and all that, but actually the time before then when they were in coalition government. And I read another coalition book from the other side, which you can wait till the next video to see, but this one is again quite a new one. I think what's so interesting about Kate Fall is that she's able to tell a story, a really long story, in the space of about, I don't know, 5 sentences. So it sort of rushes you through the 2010 to 2016 period, but it's really engaging. So there you are, just half of the books that I've read in lockdown so far. Now you're going to have to wait until part 2 to hear about the rest of them. In the meantime, you can subscribe, like and share down below. And in the comments box, I want you to tell me what you've been up to in lockdown. See you next time.